So we have the beautiful lighthouses that are all around our wonderful coastline. Coastline, that's not a good start. Coastline in around Britain, and they're all really quite different, aren't they? And historical, and they've been kept, you know, beautiful, thank goodness, by a lot of these funds trying to keep them all nice. And obviously a lot of them are open as well, aren't they, to the public? But I think this one's in Northumberland, which wouldn't surprise me because it does look very much like the coastline, doesn't it, up there? So there are lots of, really, I suppose one of the things to think about tonight are just the variety of textures and techniques we can apply within just this one painting, as well as it being really, really fun. So all I'm going to do to start with is just, you know, whichever one you choose, just, you know, how we separate out, just as a guide, whereabouts. So I'm just drawing just a light line here, but yours would be really light. Just kind of whereabouts the grass is going. You can always change it or add more or add less or whatever. I'm not going to put my lighthouse in because I want to do the colour behind it. But obviously you can do if you want to. It just makes it a little bit more tricky to get in and out. And then of course we can go over with white paint anyway with acrylics. It's much easier. It's easy to do that, so it'll cover over the blue. But if you've got if you're focusing in a little bit more, say you take a section that's nearer and you want that to be much bigger, then yeah, you know, if you want to pop it in as a block, that's absolutely fine. Or if you're doing one of the other ones where you've got, you know, rock at the front, or, you know, a rock headland coming out with rocks on, then just look at proportionally, you know, does it come out halfway or over half, 3/4 of the way, etc. And use use these 4/4 of your board to help you, or your paint. So what I'm going to do is I have a little go at this sky area, and I'm going to try and make it quite blended. Now the difficulty we've got, the only difficulty really with it being so warm, especially if we're in warm rooms or sheds or anything with the sun coming in, so it can dry quite quickly when we're in a warm room. So just to be aware, if when we're trying to blend things, either you'll need to mix up your paint and your different colours and things of your paint within the sky, or just work quite quickly and mix quite quickly as you go. So I'm going in, because there's obviously different types of blue, with a phthalo blue. You could use cerulean, which is much more turquoisey kind of Mediterranean sky. And of course we have ultramarine blue, which I always think really is very British sky when we mix it with a tint. However, this is much warmer and it's got a bit more depth to it. And I always think phthalo or cerulean adds a little bit more depth to that. You could use a turquoisey or whatever. So on here, I've got some ultramarine and I've got phthalo, and I'm going to add in a squirt of white because I'm going to use that as well. There we go. So if I'm going to tint, and if you look closely, depending on which one you're going to do, but I'm looking at this one. It's quite dark at the top, there's much more depth, and then it gets a bit lighter, and then it's quite pastely under here. But of course, with acrylics, we want to be doing like the very back to the front. So I'm going to ignore the cloud and pop that on after these like lovely cirrus clouds, aren't they? So or stratus even, they're a bit like kind of linear. So I'm just going to mix up and do some testing on this bit of paper just to see which of the blues I'm going to use. I've got a tissue handy because, again, just to get off any colours in between I don't want. So this is obviously this is as it is. It's probably a little bit dark, so I'm just going to add, see about just moving on the palette here. I might add just a bit of ultramarine blue and see what happens with that. We're just testing at this stage. Oh, I quite like that actually, but tiniest tint of white in there. So because to me this is two-toned, mix that up a bit more. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. make it nice and so I'm popping plenty of water in it, but not so it's going to run down the page watery, just so that we can keep it moving really, and plenty of it, because to get a nice coverage. So I'm just going to test that again. All right, so that's kind of the top of my page, but what I want to be doing is adding a little bit more lighter, making it slightly lighter as we go down. Okay, so I want another tone in there, and this is because I want to blend it together. So I want to make sure I've got enough mixed up so that when I start to do that, I can easily do it. Make sure I can cover it all. And then as we get under here, it's really quite pasty. So I'm going to go in. I'm actually going to pop a little bit of ultramarine in that one. See what that's like. Not quite as light as I want it to be, because I want it to go under these clouds. I'm going to pop the clouds over the top anyway, but it's nice if we kind of make it a little bit more of that misty colour to start with. Let's see. Okay, that will be fine. Oh, it's getting a little bit turquoisey there. So I'm just going to go back in with a bit of ultramarine. I think ultramarine, what it does, it kind of knocks down the colour a little bit. So it's not quite too pastel-y. So I've got 3 tones there and I should be quite happy. I'm definitely going to go with a nice flat brush. The reason for that is I can really just gonna move that down a bit. I can really kind of work it into the board. I'm just going to pull the board down actually a little bit so I can reach it a bit better. My brush is quite long. I might end up tapping the camera. So I'll just move this picture down a little bit. So make sure my brush is nice and wet as well. And I'm going to start off with this tone. Move down. Getting a nice good coverage. The beauty of using this flat brush, and I know I rave about them, is that you can really work it into the board. Now I am going to need to pop more in there. I've just realised I've not got quite enough in there, because I want a good coverage on this board. Sometimes that happens, we don't quite mix enough up, so you want plenty so that it gives, as you're moving it backwards and forwards. Yeah, so we're just working that, just working that paint into it. And as I said, it's, we can easily do that. We can go backwards and forwards with it and kind of until we get the kind of coverage that we're really happy with. And then whilst that's still wet, I'm going to work down these layers. Where it changes the colour. And start to kind of work in the other ones. It's almost a little bit, so it still looks a bit patchy at the minute. So I'm going to work quite quickly on this in a minute. I'm just going to continue to work in these edges here until we feel like, it's transitioning in a little bit into the colours that we want. And then again, underneath here. So what will be happening as well is you'll be getting a bit of glare off my wet, where it's wet off the screen. Once that settles down, you'll be able to see the colour a little bit better. Going on here. So we've just got these lovely layers. Transitioning through the colours. And we get kind of a nice, a nice effect really, don't we? I've got to be careful because I'm pulling it off a little bit. And it's actually incredibly relaxing to do, if I'm honest. It's really lovely. So I'm going to go even lighter down here at the bottom. As I said, you know, we can just keep going. Just be careful if you've got pencil near the border, because it does actually get a little bit muddy, you know, if you've got dark pencil lines. So you keep yours nice and light. If I wasn't demonstrating, I wouldn't have that there. Yeah, until you're happy with your you know, your coverage and everything. You know, work it in all the way up and go all the way up to the top if you want to, like that. So we do get this kind of much, you know, smoother transition between the layers of what's actually going on, and actually sometimes finding a few like little, you know, sideways lines in it is actually quite therapeutic anyway. It's quite, you know, it's nice that we quite like to see sideways movements of lines and things. So then when you've got that, you can just have a little look and decide, you know, is it where I want it to be? And then you can, if you wanted to adjust anything that you can, you know, you can make the top darker. So I could make this top darker if I wanted to. Sometimes, well, actually more often than not, we get light. It's lighter towards the horizon, which is interesting. So I keep clunking the top of this here. These sideways lines are really nice. Sideways movement, so it's very restful, should I say. Yeah, until you're happy, really. It'll all change when we start to look at things like putting on the lighthouse, etc. Just enjoy doing yours. The key really is just keeping things moving, just so that it doesn't dry quickly, really. Whoops. Well, I'm quite happy to stop with mine there. I've got a little line in the middle, but that's going to add to it. So when you've got your, you know, your base layer with the colours that you want in there, and you feel like, I feel now I've got 3 colours on and there's not like a really obvious band, which is good. What we're going to do is we're going to create these lovely clouds and make it really feel, it'll just feel lovely. So I'm going to go in with a flat brush again. Now you can use the same brush. I'm just going to go down the sides because I'm on a small board. I'm not even on an A4 one. So when I demoed this morning, I used a massive brush. So I'm going to still go in with my flat brush. And what I'm thinking about now is these clouds. So while it's still damp, I'm just going to go in. I'm not going to go straight in with the white, because when you look, it's a little bit more misty. So I'm just going to make a really do it over here. So I'll show you what I'm doing. Like a really light coloured misty colour. Just go in with a bit of cloud. Test it. I'm going to test it on my tester paper over the top to see if it's thin enough. Okay, it probably is. So what I want to be able to see is that it will it'll kind of cover over the top, but you can still see a little bit through it, which is what I feel. Might just pop a tiny bit more water in there, actually. I think that's gone a little bit too dark now, so I'm just going to pop a bit more white in. Always adjusting. Yeah, tiny bit more white again. And again. Right, we'll give it a go now, give it a whirl. So what I'm going to do, I've just kind of used the edge of my brush to make these lovely, I don't know if they're stratus or they are cirrus. Cirrus, I think, are a bit lighter, aren't they? These are a bit more linear. And I'm just going to literally take side to side and kind of wiggle it so it's a bit softer at the top. And we won't see that really bright kind of light yet, because this is just the overall taking these clouds across. I'm just wiggling my brush up, but generally using the edge of it to get that effect. One, you know, they come down and over. But because it's so see-through, we've got quite a bit of water to paint in there. We can, it doesn't matter, you know, if we kind of don't quite get the shape right, because we're going to build up the layer of cloud, and it's a nice way of doing it, building it up gradually. So yes, I'm going to try. So what you can do is you can start to kind of make these, you know, sometimes they feel like they've been kind of dragging up and down, don't they, these clouds? So I'm just going to put some little dragging marks in there. Just building it up and up, building the shape up, and it's nice and see-through still. And there's quite a lot over here. It will start to take more shape once we start to put the highlights in it, because it's just a tint at the moment, just covering over. That's why it was nice to put that light background colour in down here as well. So it's just, you know, just kind of use the edge, but wiggle it about as well. All of these in over the top. Bigger coverage over here. So I'm just going to mix a bit more now. A bit more white, a bit more ultramarine. This bit down here. Just give it a test on this. It's a bit darker. I thought it was. So I need to make it a bit thinner. So that's the key, really, is make it nice and thin. We can do this over acrylic. It doesn't matter. You know, we don't have any particular rules about how much you're supposed to add or not. I'm just going to move that a bit more, thin it out. I'm not going to put any more colour on, just water. Move that around a little bit more. So it's not quite as thin as the one I've just put on, because it is a bit of a thicker bank of cloud down here. But what I am going to do is now start to kind of build this cloud up here as well, where it's a little bit lighter in places. Just pop a little bit more on. So we can add more, so we don't feel like, you know, if we make an error with it, it's not really, because we're building it up gradually. There's a bit down here. It's kind of like really fluffy, aren't they? I mean, you can do this with a round brush as well, but I think sometimes these stratusy ones are a bit flatter. Lend themselves well to just kind of moving your brush along, really. And I do always like to have a go at showing just some ideas with how to use the brushes, really, because we end up with loads of brushes. I'm not really sure what to do with them, so it's nice to do that. Okay, so that's building gradually, but now I want to go in now with the lighter. I probably will now go in with a round brush just to pick out. So I'm just going to move that, just make sure I'm covering everywhere now. Move that. And just all I'm doing is just moving that paint that I've got. Make sure I've got everything there. And I'm going to go in with the really light ones now. So just, this is where you can just literally just pick out with a bit of white. You can thin it down a bit so it's still like, it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb kind of a thing, but this is where you would go. I don't know, I think if you can pick out, if there's anywhere in particular where you think, oh yeah, that's a really light bit, just pop those in. A few here, you know, bits, darker bits, you know, brighter bits of cloud. Picking out those little bits that are a bit more of a highlight. They're just, our skies are gorgeous, really are, our summer skies. So yes, we're just really picking out these bits where, you know, we just get this lighter, brighter bit of cloud in there. If we put it everywhere, you won't get the contrast between bits that are and the bits that aren't. So it's just really picking out those key areas. And again, you can, you know, depending on how they are, just whisk them up a bit. It's actually easier to work in big than it is a tiny one like this, because you can kind of pop it, just get it really on much more quickly actually. But lovely all the same. Yeah, all this will change once again once we put our lighthouse and everything over the top, but just enjoy getting sucked into those clouds because they're really nice and enjoyable to do. Obviously some of this will be covered, won't it? If you want, you know, if you've got any other big areas of cloud you want to kind of pop a bit more on, then that's fine. Do that as well, make it a bit misty or whatever. There we go. Right, I'm going to leave mine there. I might just drag that along a little bit, I think. See, keep going back to that flat brush. Right. There we go. Now mine's dried a bit up here, and I'm actually going to go back because I'm not as happy with that the finish on that. So I'm just going to go back up to the top and just finish. And you know, feel free to do anything like that as well if you're finding you're not quite where you want it to be with it. I think what happened was I overworked it, and you can do that where it almost pulls it back off again. So don't worry if that's happened, because it can be rectified. Acrylics, very forgiving. We just need to let it dry in between, otherwise it'll just continue to pull off. There we go. Okay, I'm much happier with that now. Much happier. Right. And again, you know, some people want to go light with sky. You know, it's very much dependent on what colour you most prefer, really. People love real dark blues. This looks quite a bit different actually in the light. See if. No, it's not really picking it up, the depth of it. It's a bit, that's a bit more. Okay, never mind. We'll I think it's because of the yeah. So I'm just going to take a pause there and see how everyone's getting on with that. Okay, so having a little think about the land in here, and obviously we have these fantastic swathes of lovely grasses like on our coastline, you know, Northumberland all over the place, and they're really quite soft in this picture. So a way of getting that is you could use just a wayward brush where the bristles are a bit all over, or you could kind of splay out the ones on a flat brush, or you could use a fan brush. Any of those would work. And we're just going to try and recreate pretty much the shape of these like little mounds of grass, really. So it's quite nice to use up those old brushes for things like this if you've got any. So just thinking about colour, I'm just going to turn my palette round a little bit. I'm going to go in with some, I think this one's chrome green, but you could use sap green. Oh, and then I'm going to have a darker green as well. But if you don't have a dark green, you could use a bit of brown and a bit of green. And now let's see. There we go. The darker green is, I mean, phthalo green or hooker's green, any of those which are dark. Actually, that's not a very dark phthalo green at all. So I might have to just use a bit brown with mine. And this is when we think about the shadows, because obviously we've got mid-tones, we've got some shadows in there, or you could even use a bit of blue if you prefer. And then the highlights and things on here, obviously we've got some kind of other brights and greens and some yellowy colours. I'm going to just pop a few yellowy ones in there. It's just what you can see, really. And some what I would say are more straw coloured ones. So I'm going in with a bit of Naples yellow, but you could use a little bit of yellow ochre for the straw kind of coloured ones, because they get a bit hot, don't they? These grasses, and a bit kind of in the light they look much lighter, so you can pop a bit of ochre and a bit of white in there. Just make sure you've got different change of water after using your blues if you can, because they do get really muddy quite quickly. And you can give your brushes just a quick wipe between them, because what you don't want is to go into the next painting with all blues in there, because it will make all your, you know, all your rocks with your kind of your lighter colours a little bit dark. So yeah, so on these I'm actually going to go in with a mid-tone just to start with. So I'm going to thin it down a little bit, but you can, you know, not really thin it down too much if you don't want to. You can go in like with straight acrylic to get the texture. Load plenty up on your brush if you're doing that. And I'm going to try and splay it out as well, like I said. And this is really just to get some first things on. So what we'll end up with is some quite flat edges, and we can thin those edges, you know, make those a bit nicer as we go. But we almost get these lovely kind of mounds of grass, and just kind of poking up there and try and splay them out. I'm just kind of just following some of these patterns. As I said, it's going to be a little bit there'll be patches of it where it's a little bit flatter here. But what it does is stop us losing our way as well. But it's just another way of showing how we can use texture as well as alongside the contrast of texture with a kind of a more blended effect. Just works really well together. So I'm just making sure that those brush bristles are splayed out, and then you get this feeling of soft grasses. Now, if you want to, between those, you can go in with your darks. I'm going to put a bit of brown with this dark green to darken it off a bit because I want some. So I'm going to work into those patches just with the right on the edge. Now, if you want to be a bit more careful with it, you can go in with another brush. But it's still important to get those contrasts so that we know that this is the deeper areas of our grasses. There's depth between it as well. It helps us a lot with understanding what's going on. So these are our shadowy areas. Between layers, we often find these as well. So I'm just going to go in again with a normal green. And actually it's starting to get quite light here. So I'm just going to go in with a bit of green in between. But then I'm going to start to lighten this up with a bit of yellow. So you can decide which yellow it is. So I've got a bit of brighter chrome yellow here. Or you can try a bit of Naples yellow or a tint with yellow. Just make sure I've got that brown up my brush first though, having said that. Again, you can splay those bristles out. Try and keep the effect of the grasses. It's going to look a little bit odd to start with, so this isn't obviously looking how I want it to do at the end. And so this is where your brain goes, no. And we've just got to go, yes, it will be fine. We know what we're doing. We're building up these layers. Or always when we have layers, it confuses us terribly because we want to see the finished layer. We don't want to see the half layer. And we're just popping in, starting to add these lighter ones over the top as well. Where else can I see it? Just to give us this really soft feel, really. It's really nice, isn't it? One of the most, I really love seeing these at the seaside. These kinds of lovely grasses. And then obviously if you've got some on the top here, you get some much lighter ones on the top, don't you? So you can pop them on as well. They often are highlighted on the top, aren't they? Because they're catching the light the most. So I'm still just using a nice flat brush, but like I said, you can go in with any brush you want. Just remember to save those old brushes from now on. We're doing kind of anything that's a bit rough, like got a rough end to it. And you can even go, like I was saying, you can even go and thin it down. So you can go, if there's any like loose ones that you can see, you can just kind of pop those over the top like that to soften it down even further. Like that. Now I've used like a light yellow, but you don't have to. You can even go in with, if there's any bit of very lights, go in with a bit of a white tint mix. So it's just capturing that feel that we have when we're on the coastline around here. Yeah, and you can even bring it down into, like use that little soft brush if you want to bring some of these grasses into the ones that you've done as well. So this again is going to help us to start to make sense of what's going on. No, it's not just, you know, we're just kind of breaking up some of these clumps a little bit. But actually what we've done is create a lot of the work already just by, you know, working into the ones that we've done. Just bringing those in. Just keep working into it. It starts to feel much more like a you know, like the grasslands that we know of well there. And vice versa, if you think, oh, I've just took out some of the, like the shadow, I need some depth back in, then just work a little bit of that back in between as well. That helps sometimes. Just so we get a little bit of, you know, see what's actually going on. And just keep working through it like that, building those, you know, building those kind of swathes of lovely soft colours through. I'm just continuing to work on the grass at the moment. Some of them are getting much lighter. So again, those colours over by the lighthouse side that are getting much lighter, then that can be a mid-tone, you know, going with the much lighter colours and just add, you know, a few highlights even so on there. So I'm just going to go in with this much lighter green. I've mixed you know, some light yellow into. And then again, you know, when you've got the really light ones, you can just go in with those. Some of those even could have just a tint, like light yellow tint on. So light, aren't they? And then you can add in, again, you know, just get the shapes of them like bumps in the foliage. We're just kind of working in that. Obviously, we've got some that come into the sand, but the ones that come into the sand, you can actually add them properly over the top if you want to. I'm just working in some of these clumps of grass here. But yeah, I'm almost now getting to the point where that's going on neat. Not really putting an awful lot of water in that anymore. Bring that down. What I will say is, remember though, it's really important to hold your work away from you, because it's going to look totally different how it will on the wall. And when we're up close to this kind of texture, our eyes don't like it. But actually, when we look at it from a distance, it's much, you know, it's as it should be, really, because that's how we're used to seeing it. It's like anything, what we're used to is how we see things properly most of the time. I remember to do that. I always have to hold people's work back when I'm in person for that very reason. So remember, when you're working from home, to take that same step back from your work, or like just hold it away from you. I'm just working in some of these shadows now over this side. I'm not doing them quite as deep as over here because that's much darker. Just a few little areas here to show the, you know, underneath where the grasses are, where you get this kind of depth. I think I'm making it up a bit as well, but that's fine. That's what we do, isn't it? We put our own take on things, and then just obviously the further near the back we get, there's less and less detail, which is good. We don't want too much detail when it's far away. A few in here. And again, you know, if you've want to work in any particular ones in, there are some quite nice yellowy colours in there, yellowy tones. So, you know, you can go in with your brush, or you can go in and get some more out on it. Those. So just build it up again. It's really lovely following the patterns of these. And again, if you want to, you know, soften any of these down with the, up in a bit more detail with your other brush, you can. Just kind of looking at the highlights on here, what's sticking up, what's not. Okay. And a little bit more to this now. So, and then obviously we've got sand to think about. So you can, a good colour for sand, you can either like take a tiny bit of yellow ochre or something like that. A bit of white. And again, sand varies enormously. So we can go in with one tone, but sometimes sand is kind of, has a bit of a bluish tone. So let's pop that in. Work some of these over the top anyway, some of these sandy bits. I'll just move that up a bit so you can see. Sometimes it has a bit of a bluey tone when it's in the shadow as well. So we'll just have a little look at what you can see. It might even have a bit of a pinky shade. It feels a bit pinky over here to me, but again, entirely what your colour you see. So feel free. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of red into that mix. A bit more white. I'm just going to dab it in really. But texture wise, you know, you can just make the shapes and things that you can see just with your brush. These banks and stuff that go up, it's a bit darker under there. Can't really see that pink here, but I'm just going to pop it to there. And then there's some darker, I don't know what colour that would be, but you know, like shadow. So you could even go in with a purple or like a bluey browny colour. Depends what you can see, I'd say. I'm going to go for bluey brown. I'm just going to go in on this sandy bit, wherever I can see the shadow cast there. Bit here as well. It's all thoughts, isn't there? When you start looking at the sand and everything, it's like, oh. Just try and recreate the shadows on the sand, and then the same likewise again, you know, finish up with the lightest. So if you can see anywhere where it's hardly any yellow, it's quite just sandy, you can just go in with, you know, white. You'll put the tiniest bit of brown in it, and it sounds weird, that I know, but so it becomes more stone like colour. So I would say the tops, sometimes the tops of these usually over where you see a shadow, isn't it? Because you get the top of something followed by a shadow underneath, where you get these other brighter areas. There we go. So we're just really kind of adapting to what we can see there. And then if you've got any greens, any other, you know, areas of grass that need to overlap, then you can just go in there. It's just pop the little bits, little grasses, if you've got any more to put on, just over the top, so it makes it feel, you know, nice and natural. Like it's coming into the sand, and then that makes it a little bit more realistic, as it were. And then we can start to see, you know, it makes sense to us more as we start to put all these different elements on. It's like, oh yeah, I know what that's like when I'm on the beach and you don't realise there's a bit of grass, a grassed area there. And again, you know, just go through, is there any more you want to lighten up? We're just looking for balance really across there. And we're just adding, you know, we're just creating the balance as we go really across the painting. And I'm just going to take a pause to see how you're getting on with that. Okay, so we've got this lovely lighthouse now. I'm just going to move this board down a little bit. So again, you can position this lighthouse where you want. If you can even move it more central, if you want it more central, you can make it come forwards a little bit, or you can do it exactly the same size. So one of the things to bear in mind, I'm just moving my board down a little bit so we can see all these elements. One of the things to think about when we're doing that, just move that down a bit more, is finding like the right height, and also, you know, how wide it is, and how wide it is kind of nearer the top. So I always pop in, so I'm just going to put mine here, kind of central. I'm going to put the bottom starting point here. Now, if you're not sure about the width of it even, you can kind of look at it as a whole and think, unless you want to make it slightly bigger, in which case you'll need to make it a bit taller as well. But I'm looking at it in comparison. So I would say that's halfway. It's probably about a fifth of this half, or a tenth in total. So you probably get about 10 of them on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, not quite, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it is a bit about a 9. 9 for a 10th. So we can kind of gather more or less, if we're really struggling to see how big, I'm just going to make mine slightly smaller after that. Now I'm going to go in just with a pencil, but you don't have to. If you are going to go in with a pencil, just bear in mind that do it lightly rather than dark so it doesn't scrub up, because we're going to put white on. So as long as we've got the right width at the bottom, I'm going to look at where it comes to the top. So that's the top of the thing. Then what I want to be doing is looking at, you know, where the top, before we put all of this red stuff on it, all the you know, the stair, where the walkway is right at the top, with the banisters all the way around. I'm going to look at, you know, where the top is, and then you can literally just use a bit of card. And again, if you're wanting to check out the proportion, you can just look at that proportion of the top, the width of the very top of it here, in comparison to the bottom. It's not massively bigger, actually. It goes in a little bit, and it does lean in a little. So if you've got this top line, it makes it much easier to use the same kind of lean, as it were, on each side. So it's not massively, is it? So if you took that up there, you can see that there's a little gap, so it's just a little bit. And you can do that with your paper. Hold it straight and then lean it in the same amount. Hold it straight and lean it in. So it gives us a bit of an idea. We're just doing that fact checking thing again. So then you can get, you know, the general idea of it. And then obviously there's all these other little areas here. So we've got this balustrade here. We've got then the inside of the inside here, where the top is showing of the lighthouse, before we've got all the railings and everything. And what we can do with that, again, if you hold this across the top, I'll just move it down. If you hold this across the top, look, right, you can see it's got a little lean. The ellipsis is that way. So if we hold it there even, you can see that it's got a little ellipsis there coming up. So we can actually look at that there and create that shape. So it has got a little bit more of a lean. It doesn't, you can't always tell these things. That's why we just do a little bit of fact checking. And then we've got all these little structures that come out. You can't, the smaller you go, mine's very small, you can't really see too much. But we can just have a little go. And then obviously it's got its little hat on. So we can pop its little hat on. And again, if you've got a central point to start with at the top, then you can make sure each of those, you know, each of these sides comes down in an equal way. And then of course we've got these, but I'm going to actually, you can do it too. You can paint the whole thing in white and then wait for it to dry and then put this red in, or you can just separate it into three parts. And again, if you look at the ellipsis on this, that's straight across. You can see it just goes above here slightly. And again here, it's easy to see with the red. You just get that little curve. So you can do that again here. Line it up and even just draw that little ellipsis up. And you can do the same again further up. Like that. And then we can literally just go and colour it in more or less. And we put little details on the top. So entirely up to you what you go in with. But it does have slightly different shades. I'll just move this down so you can see. This does have slightly different shades. Do it like that actually. There's a bit in the shade at this side, but we can do that afterwards. So, you know, if you're struggling to go down, if you're struggling to kind of go in the lines, as it were, and you can pop a bit of paper there and then just paint over all of it, including a bit of the paper. And then when you bring it away, she says it should, as long as you do it carefully, it should be okay. And it should have covered it. But I like to just go in and have a try, because what it does do, it helps us practice our accuracy. So you may need to kind of pull some of this water, some of these grasses back over it once you've got the lighthouse in. The other thing you can do is turn it round. So if it's easier for you to go left to right, which it is for a lot of people actually, then do that, go left to right with it instead of up and down. It's our most natural way of working anyway. Because we write left to right, so it feels very natural to work that way. There isn't really a set way of doing it, it's just whatever is easiest for you and most enjoyable. So same here. Yeah, you can keep turning it all the time if you want to. Spin that down. One of the keys is making sure you've got enough paint on so it moves really easily. And then you're not having to like kind of go over these lines and things. So I'll move that down a bit because it's a bit less red. I mean, this morning, to be fair, the easiest for me is to generally, it was just to paint the whole thing white and then just go over the red. It took me a lot less time to just go all the way down with it. But you know, if you've not got time to let it dry, that's the other thing. Then you just do it in sections. Make sure we've got that curve at the top as well. Yeah. Ooh, we're all starting to think, yeah, it's a bit more like lighthouses now. I can see it. I'll just go down a brush as well. So reds, well, it's entirely up to you, whatever you've got. What I'd say, we can always put a slight darker bit on one side anyway, and a slightly lighter bit on here, just because it is one side is more in the shadow, but we'll sort that in a moment. Again, I'm going to have to turn mine round. See, I think in different countries where languages are written in different ways, people might find it easier to do it right to left, for example. Yeah, so just thing is with acrylics anyway, even if you don't make the perfect curve, you can do it, go over it again once it's dry with a smaller brush. So we're never really kind of losing anything with acrylics. There's always a way around things. Yeah. So we're just getting those colours in. Go for a slightly smaller brush, because I've got quite a big thick one here. Okie dokes. So on our lighthouse, as I was just saying about, we've got one side that's slightly darker. It's a little bit in the shadow, so I'm actually going to pop that shadow in. I'm not going to make it too much darker. I'm just going to, if you see here, I might just add a bit of blue ultramarine to the red. That turns it quite quickly into a purpley colour. I'm just going to pop that shadow down that side, just like I can see on there. Just so that we know, it gives us an idea that we're in the shadows over here. I'll just put a bit of blue stuff on here. It just gives a bit more context to our lighthouse. Plus, same at the bottom. So I might actually use a small amount of that I've just mixed up here. So see it on there. It's a bit purpley. I'm just going to pop it in with a bit of white and make a tint for the bottom here. You don't have to use the same colour, but I'm going to use that, or you could use blue or something like that. But just again, I just want it to have, I might need a bit more blue in it actually, because it's a bit light. Again, I'm just going to follow that line down that I've just started to create with the, so again, it just gives us that sense that there is a, that we're a bit in the shade. And the same on this side up here, I'm going to use the same tone there. Bit underneath there as well. Yeah, so we're getting a bit of context to this as well now, and it won't look too flat. And then I'm going to pop in, because it does get a bit brighter as well in place. So I'm going to leave that for now. I'm just going to make it, put these windows in. So you can use whatever colour you want. You can use a bit of brown, or you could use purple, black, blue, or you could even use a bit of black if you want. I'm not going to go that dark, to be fair. I'm just going to use blue black because it feels enough. But it is man-made, so if you wanted to use black, that's fine. And just pop these little windows in. So you can do get the curve. There's a little curve, isn't there? So you can paint the individual panes in if you want, or you can paint all of that as a shape and then very carefully pop a couple of lines across. It's entirely up to you, whichever you fancy doing. I think probably I'll maybe find that easier to paint most of that window in. There. I might just leave a bit of the white showing. There you go. The top of my window's gone a little bit pear-shaped, but that's fine, because we just can either lift it off. Look, if it doesn't, we just use our white to neaten it up around the edge. That's the beauty of doing the window, not doing it last. And I'm just going to, because it's a small one, I can only really see these two lines on the small print. And I'm using working small, so I'm just going to put that in there. And obviously we've got this other one at the bottom, so let's get that one in as well. That one there. I have to go a bit darker with that. Fun doing it though. That's really fun having a go at these. Just see something there, but I'm not sure what it is. It's the edge of something. Now, we can't see that as much at the minute because mine's quite dark, so I'm just going to put in some of these lighter areas. So I'm going to pop in. You could put in a bit of orange if you wanted to, or mix a bit of yellow with the red, just to make it so that where the sun's shining on it, it's just a bit lighter. So that's all I'm doing, just putting kind of a bit of an orangey colour in. Put it this side, down the side of the window. And it just like highlights it a little bit. So we're just paying attention to where the light falls, really, is what we're doing here. And then if there's any other that are much lighter, then just pop a little bit of a tint in with it. It's getting quite light over this side, isn't it? In places. So just add an extra bit of a tint where you can see it much lighter. Just adds a bit of character as well, doesn't it, to the lighthouse? And then again, you know, if you can see any of those window panes, I can't see too much on this one, but I'm just going to pop a little bit over. Just a suggestion that it's there. And then further down, I want to just pop in some of those light bits back. Oops. So I'm just going to get some of this white. And if it's really bright somewhere, I'm just going to add a bit more of the white, especially over here under this shadow, because it's really feels like it's quite bright there. There we go. So I'm happy with that. I'm not going to do any more to that lighthouse now. But what I want to finish off is the little roof. So let's bring this lighthouse down as well. And then we're really just copying what we've got. And the same applies. So we're just looking at the different tones. So you can go in with your base red for these bits. I'm going to do this bit underneath here. I'm going to add a little bit of that yellowy colour to lighten it up a bit. Mine's quite dark. And we have gone in with quite a dark colour underneath it. This blue is quite dark, so you might need, depending on what good coverage you can get with your acrylics, you might need to do a couple of layers, which is fine. A bit better, that's a bit brighter anyway. But then underneath it is quite dark. So we get a little bit of that shadow cast under here. So I'm just going to go in with this dark colour again. A bit brown actually. And we get this little cone-like shape, don't we, underneath it, which is really nice. That helps us also, helps the top bit to pop a bit as well. We're kind of getting those shapes in between, aren't we, of what's going on there. We may even be able to see some of these lighter rails over the top here. So you can just kind of pop a tiny bit of white over the top where those rails are over. I mean, we're really going into the minute detail now, to be fair though, with this. And then I'm just having a little look at popping a bit more of this colour on. All fun, really nice to kind of get in. Got so many different things going on in this painting, it's really lovely. Yeah, we've got the texture in the sand and the foliage, then we've got like the lighthouse that's quite precise, and then we've got this very you know, free and easy clouds and things going on as well, so it's a nice combination. I'm just going to pop in some of this on the top as well because it's a similar colour. And then some of these darker, well actually we've got some of the red with these here. The railings, I'm just going to go with an ordinary red for that, and just really pop in what I can actually see, which is just kind of some bars. Can't see everything in there. I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter, put a bit of light blue back in. So this is what I was saying, if you go over something, not to worry, because you can pop some of the colour, the sky blue, back between it. I think because I'm working so tiny, it's difficult to see it, but we can always pop it back. Just mixing up a bit of bluey colour, so I can pop that back in between those railings there. That's a bit better. And then obviously we've got all these, we've got this very dark section underneath the, you know, the top. Certainly makes you see what's there, because I don't think I've ever looked, even though I've been in a few lighthouses, I haven't really looked at this much detail at them. Got these little spokes going off. And then underneath, so I'm going to take that down. That is dark, I'm going to make it brown, but I'm going to add a bit of ochre in it, so it's just a bit softer than the other colours. It's more brown. And then just try and recreate what I can see on there. It's just kind of a few, you can't see everything when it's in small detail, you can see bits. And then if there's any other bits you want to make it pop, I'm just going to pop a bit of this railing on here. So it does feel like there's a bit of a shadow underneath. Again, this side's in the shadow, so I'm going to pop a bit of shadow in this side. And then brighten this up with a bit of yellow on this side. A bit of yellow and white and pink. Same on the hat. Highlight on that side. You can just kind of pop a little bit of the edge on. And then the top as well. So we've got a few things going on there. We've also got some these spikes going up this side. And then we've got shapes of these, this lovely, it's like the aerial, I suppose, isn't it? And there, we can lighten it up a little bit as well. Pop a bit of light where the light's kind of catching it. Yeah. And just our own take, just, everyone's will be so different, just getting your own take on it, really. And I'm going to lighten that up a little bit now, because it's a bit lighter than that. So I'm going to pop a little bit more over. I'll make sure my brush is cleaning them. Still quite a bit dark, isn't it? But again, we're just looking at the tones and everything in them, where the light catches. Of our most wonderful, and that's gone really dark, that's gone a bit dark now, so I'm just going to this bit here. Sometimes it can really ruin a colour if you've got a bit of blue in something, just got to be really careful. Some red back in it. And again, it's entirely up to you how bright that contrast is when you do it. I'm making mine a bit more translucent now. Yeah, there you go. So I've gone quite, my contrast is quite strong there. Taking out quite a bit of that red, and again, I might actually add just a small amount back in. It's not too, but yeah, so it's trial and error, isn't it? Sometimes you do things and you like it, and then sometimes you might add a little bit too much of something. But you can always, you can always go back over it. That's the beauty. I'm just going to pop some colour back in there. And then, just stop when you think. It's always best to come back to it later if you're not altogether sure. I'm going to leave mine there now. Soften down this side a little bit. There we go. Yeah, and then what we can do is just have a look at our picture overall and make a decision. Do we want to, do you want to check anything else? Do you want to add anything? Do you want to change anything else, or do you just want to leave it there? Or do you want to make any of your cloud lighter? All decisions to be made, but they're just lovely, aren't they? Just absolutely gorgeous to paint. These lighthouses. And I think we'll be looking much more closely at lighthouses when we see one next time, won't we? And just see, because they're lovely, so lovely to paint. And that's the last pause. I hope everyone's enjoyed that, and I'll come and see how you're all getting on. Enjoy.